Welcome to Liberty Talk Canada. I'm Odessa-Orlewicz. So I have the Randy Hillier backstage waiting to come on the show. And I was so fortunate that he was willing to come on this show. If you guys don't know who Randy is, Randy was the first politician to speak out about the fraud. And a lot of you guys know who he is, but we need to catch up on what's actually happening now. He was just in the States doing a big, I don't know if I want to call it sort of meeting of the great minds in Senator Ron Johnson ran this thing. There was a lot of big names there, basically spilling the beans on what's happened over the last 4 years and what's happening to Canada. And America is interested about what has happened to our country. We are on the border of America, and it matters if we become communist. And so they have taken notice. Randy's a big reason for that. He went down to the States, and I'm going to actually show you a little bit of that video of him with Senator Ron Johnson and some others that are getting to the bottom of what actually occurred over the last 4 years and why. So I'm going to do a quick message for my sponsor, and then we're going to get right into it. Did you know if the banks do a bail-in, they can take the contents in your bank vault? But storing your gold and silver at home could be a huge security risk. Every day, our dollar is worth less and less. Inflation is stealing the only savings families have. Now more than ever, it's so important to hedge the savings you've worked so hard for. Banks have been failing all over the world, and social credit has all but arrived. But did you know you can do wholesale price vaulting and retail delivery from the most prestigious, reliable company in Canada? Did you also know if you decide to leave Canada, your gold and silver can be sent right to you after you arrive to your destination? The only company I personally use and trust are those awake guys at New World Precious Metals. Take control of your family's future. You can just click the link in my show description or type in the web address liberty-talk-canada.ca/gold to get on their mailing list, attend their webinar, or book an appointment. Let them know Odessa sent you.
Next presenter is Mr. Randy Hillier. Mr. Hillier served in the Canadian Parliament for 15 years and was the first member to publicly oppose his government's response to COVID. Probably didn't go well, did it? He is being threatened with a 3.5-year prison term for his support of the Canadian truckers. Mr. Hillier.
Thank you very much, Senator. And thank you also very much for your commitment to truth, freedom, and faith in your endeavors. I was elected to the Ontario Parliament on 4 different occasions and served 15 years. Ontario is Canada's most populous province and largest economy. On March 26, 2020, I became the first elected representative in any Canadian Parliament to publicly oppose the state of emergency and the lockdowns, and then the mandatory masks and mandatory jabs. The police in Ontario charged me 25 times for not abiding by the mandates and hosting no more lockdown rallies across the province. 20 charges have been withdrawn. I still have 5 of those yet to win. I have also been charged with 9 criminal offenses for being in and advocating for the Freedom Truckers Convoy in Ottawa, February 2022. The Crown Attorney is seeking a 3.5-year prison sentence for my words of encouragement at the Truckers Convoy. Senator, today and democracy is under the bright lights here in this room for all to see, and thank you. But there is a much more to government that is not under the bright lights. There is a dark side to all governments. This investigative committee is seeking answers to what did they hide. It would be a much shorter committee if it was what did they not hide. However, I'll provide one short firsthand story that reveals what the political leadership in Ontario hid from everyone's view. And I believe it was neither unique nor confined to Ontario, but ubiquitous throughout the Western world, including here in the USA. During the last week of April in 2020, my position opposing the government's preposterous and outrageous mandates were well known to everyone and to all my colleagues. I knew at the time there was about a dozen other legislators who shared my views, but not one of them would be public about their position. Although I was no longer in the government caucus and I had declared myself to be an independent member of the legislature, one day I was approached by 4 senior staff members from the Premier's office. The Premier would be akin to a state governor here in the United States. They had a singular question they wanted to discuss with me, as they knew that I would give them an honest answer. And the question was, and we did this quietly and discreetly, not underneath the bright lights of democracy, but they did want an honest answer, and the question was, Randy, how do we get out of this mess? They knew that the virus and its harm and its lethality was highly exaggerated. They knew that the state of emergency was entirely unnecessary and harmful. They knew that the lockdowns were exceptionally harmful. But they also knew that the 24/7 media hysteria was out of control and had created a fearful, anxiety-ridden mob. They also knew that the Premier's closest, most influential advisors were lobbyists for pharma and tech, and that they saw the pandemic through a very, very profitable lens for themselves and for their clients. They also knew from the extensive daily polling that appealing to the mob's fear was politically beneficial. They feared, however, these 4 staffers feared the long-term damage would be horrendous to themselves, to their families, and the province. And my answer to them was very simple. I explained that they needed to be honest with the Premier and his advisors. Explain that to the public that the Premier had acted out of the abundance of caution to the uncertainty, but the facts were now known and proved that the virus was far less dangerous than first expected, that the modeling was highly fictitious and exaggerated.
So, Randy, I'm going to let you finish what you were going to say. These guys were too coward, right? Let me know.
Well, coward is one way of describing it, but they knew, like so many people, they knew that their careers would be in jeopardy if they spoke truthfully. They knew that the Premier's closest advisors, the people who actually wield the power in every political party, would have had these guys out on their asses pretty quickly. And, you know, for your audience, it's important to remember political leaders in Canada are not chosen because of their high intellectual abilities and knowledge. They're chosen more often than not because they have a big name that will garner votes and that their intellect is limited and they're easily manipulated. Case in point is not just Doug Ford. I think we've got somebody on Parliament Hill who fits that category as well. And, you know, they're selected for those two reasons. Can their name bring them into power? And can they be manipulated once they're there for the people who actually run the party? And these 4 staffers, like all of us, they bought the con originally, just like I did and just like you did. Nobody knew on March 17th if this was a con job or not. it didn't take too long for most of us to figure it out. And they weren't prepared to lose their jobs, like so many others. So it has become very profitable in our culture to be dishonest rather than to be honest and truthful.
Mhm.
And that's what it really comes down to. Politicians, political parties. Well, politicians are easily led. They're not they are followers. They are not actual leaders, and they're easily to be manipulated. So that's my perspective. Obviously there are other political leaders that wouldn't fit into that category. Ron DeSantis in Florida wouldn't necessarily fit into that category. The Prime Minister of Sweden wouldn't fit into that category, or Belarus. And then I think there's also political leaders who were not necessarily con, but were part of the con as well. But I think for the most part, most political leaders were manipulated and con like most everyone else.
Yes, because once you looked at the statistics while we were in Canada of what was actually happening after a couple of months, there's no way to not be red-pilled on that. You're looking at the statistics, the flu has somehow disappeared, and it's actually a better survival rate for kids and regular people, and almost the same survival rate for the elderly for the flu. So once we saw these statistics, anybody should have said, what's happening here? Now, for those that don't know you, which very few people, you were an MPP in Ontario. You were elected 4 times. And I do want to get into what happened. You were conservative until what happened with Doug Ford?
So through my entire political career, I was always at odds with the party insiders. I had raised on a number of occasions the corruption that I had seen within not just the Liberal Party that I was opposing, but also within my own party. And so I was often offside and in the political penalty box with my party for speaking out. And it really came to blows. It wasn't so big of a deal when we were in opposition. But in 2018, when the Conservatives gained power, my commitment to honesty and opposing corruption came head to head with the Premier's insiders. His campaign manager, his lobbyists, his GR people like Corey Tonight, Dean French, Chris Froggatt, the people who are stuffing their pockets from their access to and their ability to manipulate the Premier. We came blows. They told me that I was out unless I was going to make a firm commitment never to talk without their approval about the things that I saw in politics. I basically told them to go stuff it, and out I was. They told me I could be in caucus as long as I was a trained seal, a parrot, which I wasn't going to do. So in March, the party and I chose separate ways.
But you kept getting reelected as independent.
So then in 2022, I decided not to seek re-election again.
Okay.
And after what happened in Ottawa in February of 2022, I decided it was now time for me to make sure that my family was safe, that we were prepared, that this con job that COVID opened our eyes to is much bigger than COVID, much lengthier than COVID. And I do want to say one thing, Odessa. You mentioned at the beginning about our country becoming communist. I have no fear of that because we actually are a fascist country. Our political system has been completely co-opted. It is completely integrated with the corporate world. We have our public policy and our corporate policies are seamless. They're integrated, and our governments serve a corporate money interest. They do not serve the public's interest whatsoever.
You're
And
right. I often say communist, but I also say fascist. I also say it's a techno takeover. I kind of throw all those words around because it's a little bit of everything I'm seeing, but fascist is right because our government is not running anything.
I've seen it 100 times if I saw it once in the legislature, and this got me offside so often. Just about every piece of legislation that was ever advanced in the Ontario legislature was done so at the behest of a corporate interest. There was, and that corporate interest was willing to slosh a lot of money around with the lobbyists, with the campaign managers, and make sure that legislation favored their industry or their particular business. And when I say business, a union is also a business. So union and corporate, there's no difference. They all have money and they're all willing to spend it to have the legislature create either a monopoly or a cartel, and to make it very difficult for small businesses to compete with their businesses.
Hmm. Who would you say is the worst of the corporate lobbyists that have taken over our country right now?
Well, the lobbyists or the businesses?
Well, like the type of business, like what is the worst one right now?
Well, the ones that have the most amount of money,
Mhm.
right? That's who gets their agenda done first. The more money you bring to the political table, the faster you get things done. Here in Ontario, we just saw with this scandal with the Greenbelt, which comprised thousands and thousands of acres around Toronto, where the boundaries were redrawn. The value of the properties magically went from zero value because they were not able to be developed into developable land, which enriched those developers to the tune of about $8.5 billion. And the developers they're not shy about sloshing money around, but they don't hold a candle to big tech and big pharma. Like
Right.
the developers are fairly small potatoes in that regard. But so what pharma can get done within a few months with their money, the developers take them a few years.
It's funny you talk about pharma because I remember Doug Ford saying out loud during the hell of all the fraud, listen, if I go against, he says something along these lines, I know you know, if I go against what the health authority says we need to do, I may as well jump off a bridge with a rope around my neck.
That's exactly what he said on national news. And you have to realize this, pharma sloshes their money around everywhere. It's not just the political parties that they slosh money around. It is within our institutions and within our media, with our public health, with our hospitals, with the OMA, the colleges of physicians and surgeons. These guys are prolific at buying influence and buying outcomes.
Yep.
And so is tech. It's not just social media, but the Googles, the Alphabets, the Amazons. They have deep pockets, and it is very easy for them to buy politicians and institutions with that money.
I had a big wake up call. I never thought this many politicians would go along to get along and get a paycheck. I'm actually shocked. I thought Canadians were better than this. I thought at least half would say enough is enough, but they don't want to lose their paycheck and their little clique of friends.
Well, there's a couple things, that's true. I was certain I would find some of these other people to join with me who I knew shared my view, and even retired politicians who refused to come out of the COVID closet, let's say, because they were still had access to patronage positions, or they still had contractual entanglements with the provinces. So, but let me just make sure that most, in my humble opinion, most politicians don't know of the corruption. The political parties and the lobbyists are very skillful at manipulating and uh, manipulating politicians. They don't come out and say to you, Randy, I want to take you out to the Maple Leafs game and buy you a nice steak dinner at Barbarians because I want you to do this to support this bill. They're much more sophisticated, and they are very good at becoming friendly, and the political parties are very good at obscuring these roles and functions as well. So you really have to, what I've seen is most politicians are just happy to be given their talking points, very happy to be told what to do, and not bother opening your eyes to see who's motivating what to happen. And
it's too inconvenient. It's too inconvenient to look. There's people in my family that are very successful in the law area,
Yep.
well-known names, my maiden name, and they don't want to look. They don't want to look. They don't want to know. And you're just embarrassing the family. They don't want to look because it will completely upend everybody and everything they're working for. So they just don't want to look.
yeah, and so I think that's, and we can make that case, I think, Odessa, very clearly with the majority of Canadians don't want to look, and we see that. The evidence is all there about excess deaths. The evidence is there about that it was in the first year of COVID, the average age of death was 83.6 years of age, beyond the life expectancy of Canadians. So all the evidence was there that the masks didn't work, that the social distancing that didn't work, that the term asymptomatic spread was just a counterfeit, bogus term, a fraudulent term. All these things were easy for anyone to find out if they had an ounce of curiosity or an ounce of conviction. And it's easier for people in Western cultures just to not look and go along with the lie.
Now you are being used and abused, kind of like David Lindsay here in BC, but you on a much grander scale. They're trying to show what happens to a politician that speaks out and decides on freedom. They're using your name, Randy Hillier, to freak the doo-doo out of every other politician that would ever think to do this again. What are the charges they still have against you right now?
So I still have 5 offenses from the Reopening Ontario Act, which of course is another bogus term. The Reopening Ontario Act was just an extension of the lockdowns.
Yeah.
But duplicitous language is the stock and trade of politicians. So, and then I have 9 trumped up criminal charges. 1 is an assault on a peace officer. 2 are obstruction of peace officers. And then the rest are mischief charges, all emanating from February 2022 in Ottawa. And I use that language, Odessa, just because there are some things that I'm still not permitted to talk about on social media. So
okay. Well, I want to show this so-called assault. It is just as ridiculous as David Lindsay's. In fact, yours is, I think, even a hair more ridiculous. Okay, we have people high out of their minds, breaking into cars, rape. We had somebody from the lefty loony side literally drive over a couple people in one of the provinces when there was a peaceful protest during the COVID fraud.
That was Winnipeg.
That person drove over peaceful protesters, and all they got was what? A slap on the wrist and a bit of time at home with an ankle monitor and a tiny fine?
Yeah, it was probation. They were let off on it. Believe it was a conditional.
Right. But look at what they have done to Randy. This is what they're trying to get him on.
Let's go!
Go! Let's go! Go! I don't understand what we're even looking at here, Randy. Was that you that opened the gate? Like, where is the assault and where are you?
Well, that was me that moved the little temporary barricade. They had it set up on Parliament Hill that to get onto the hill was sort of like a cattle chute, which caused a real significant pinch point. People were being pushed and jostled trying to get through the cattle chute because they're only letting one on at a time. And of course, there was tens of thousands of people there wanting to get on the hill. So, and there was also the people leaving the hill had to go through that same cattle chute. So I was just opening up that cattle chute a little bit, alleviating or removing the pressure. And that, well, I'll use this. This is how fraudulent and how weaponized our legal system has become. In my bail hearing, the Crown prosecutor described to the Justice of the Peace that incident, and he said, Randy Hillier picked up a steel barricade and threw it at the peace officers.
No. You opened a gate. You didn't hurt anybody.
So, but it was on that fabricated falsehood that I was kept in the Crowbar Inn. I wasn't even permitted to be in the courtroom to challenge those assertions. I was listening to it on a very crappy old telephone in a concrete cubicle in the Crowbar Inn. And that's how, it's profitable to lie, and that's what he was doing.
Did the judge get to see that video?
No.
What?
No, at a bail hearing, there is no evidence actually produced. It's because the police haven't even disclosed the evidence to the Crown yet. They've just laid the charge. But I can tell everybody listening, that is the entire evidence that the Crown has me that they've used to justify both the assault and the obstruction of peace officers.
Okay, we got to watch this one more time.
Let's go!
Go! Oh my gosh. Go! There is nowhere near, you are nowhere near hurting anybody.
Let's go!
Go! Gosh. Let's go! Oh my God! We are living in like Roman times. It's okay.
Well, I would say it's more like the Inquisition, and forbid anybody who has a dissent. And we've got the yoke out there in the town square, and we'll pillory you, and we'll have you in the stock and shame you. This is what we did during COVID, and we did it by encouraging people to snitch on one another. We encouraged everyone to forget their humanity, forget their Christian values, forget any charitable consideration for anyone else, and you'd had full license to use the most awful, coarse, foul language to describe anyone who had a dissenting view.
So, did you say they're trying to say they want you to do 3 years? I don't think they're going to accomplish that, but 3 years for what? Which charge? That one?
3.5 years is total. And I believe it's 18 months for the assault and 2 years for the mischief, but I could have them reversed.
For the non-assault that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Will the judge eventually see that video? Like, have you got lawyers or?
Yeah. No, I discharged my lawyers and I'm representing myself, and I have elected to be tried by jury in Ottawa. And we'll see. I know that the Crown is not interested in justice. the legal monster, the legal machine is not interested in justice. It's interested, its value, its purpose is to prove their correctness. And they use the legal system to extract as much money and place as much of a burden and anxiety on the accused to get them to capitulate and surrender, but first taking as much money as they can from that individual. I did a little show, it's on my YouTube channel, and it was from a few years ago when I was the critic for the Attorney General here in Ontario, and I was involved with many of the Crown attorneys and many of the judges in the local bar. And I had the occasion to speak with the Attorney General, the Crown attorney in Lanark County. And we were having a great conversation. And it was during that conversation, she explained to me, everyone who comes before the court, everyone who comes before a judge is either a fool or a fiend. There's nothing in between. There is no innocence in a courtroom. The only thing that the judge has to determine is if that accused is a fool or a fiend, and then put the appropriate sentence based on one of those two categories. And so why I tell you that what's important about that individual, her name's Julie Scott. She was the Crown attorney in Lanark. She is now the director of operations for all Crown attorneys in Eastern Ontario. So ultimately, the prosecution against me is under the supervision of the director of Crown operations, who believes no one can be innocent who comes before the court.
Everything we thought about Canada has been an illusion. We ticked away with like, okay, we're really peaceful. We have a justice system. We knew that there'd be some people to be thrown in jail that were innocent. This happens in all countries, but that we were all about, justice and peace, and what we thought the definition of democracy was has been so inverted. So let's have this conversation. I told you I was going to do this during the show when we were backstage. My husband and I continue, and I'm so glad that Mike Benz came on Twitter and went on a whole bunch of shows to explain, to explain what democracy actually means to the people like Trudeau, the CBC, the liberal agenda. We always thought it meant democracy was people vote, and then the guy that gets the most votes wins. And in a peaceful democratic society with law, like America, Canada, unlike China or Russia, where they just chuck you in jail for anything, we thought we had a system in place to make sure the innocent didn't go to jail. No. Okay, for instance, in the last 4 or 5 days, twice now, I have seen on CBC, they brought on their expert, a total lib, and she said, what do you think will happen if Trump gets elected in the States? And he said, these are his words, if Trump gets elected, he used the word elected, that will be the end of democracy as we know it. Then when they're talking about the Ottawa convoy of people saying to Trudeau, we need to have a conversation with you. These mandates are not ethical. Nobody answered. Health authority would answer. He ignored. He called people names. So they peacefully go to Ottawa, do a peaceful demonstration that's allowed apparently by the charter. And he came on and said, this is a threat to our democracy, knowing he did not even have majority because it was Jagmeet Singh that made him, even able. And I said to Norb, they're literally mind screwing the sheep that democracy doesn't mean what the people want. And Mike Benz said democracy to these people, to the blob, he calls it, is making sure the institutions are protected from us.
Yeah, it is the institutions do protect the power system. The institutions are no longer serving the public interest. They are self-serving entities. The, you know, as far as Justin Trudeau is concerned, democracy is him remaining in power. As far as Doug Ford is concerned, what does democracy mean? It means the Conservatives staying in power. That's and anything is essentially legalized or permitted if it suits that end, if it meets that end. Look at, a great example of this is what's going on in the Ukraine, where hundreds of thousands of people are dying, hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent to save the democracy of Ukraine. This is a country that is arresting people and won't allow anybody to leave the country and shipping them off to the front. This is a country that has banned all other political parties other than the party in power. This is a party that jailed an American citizen, Gonzo Lira, and who is now dead because he was speaking out against the democracy.
And they have literally banned elections since Zelensky got in, right? In the last 3 years.
Yeah.
How is it that we're saying we're protecting a democracy that has banned elections and the sheep just lap it up? The CBC watchers, just half them don't even know, Randy.
Well, I would say it's more than, it's not just CBC watchers, and as bad as CBC is, there is, CTV and Global News are just another Pravda and TOSS news days. Like they are all bought and paid for. The government spending on media, between the content subsidies, the wage subsidies, and the advertising that all our governments do with media, nobody in the media is going to bite the hand that they're feeding from, and they are feeding from governments. And most Canadians are happy or willing or accepting just to be spoon-fed a bunch of pablum and BS, as long as they can go play a round of golf or go to the hockey game or maybe go down to Cuba or the Dominican for a holiday. That's the only thing that's important. Look at how our institutions are promoting genital mutilation, puberty blockers, mental health anxiety with safe injection sites. We are doing so much harm and destruction to individuals in our country, and our institutions are the ones doing it, that are causing this harm. But we have a poverty industry, we have a drug industry, we've got a homeless industry, and each one of them is filled with a mountain of bureaucrats and consultants
making a ton of money.
Yeah, to keep the problem going. And
did you see
actually to make it worse?
There was a great filmmaker, Aaron Gunn. He's running, actually, God, is it to be mayor? I can't remember. Sorry, Aaron. I think it's mayor. Aaron Gunn did Vancouver's Dying. And I wish he'd put it near the beginning, but about 2/3 of the way through his really well done, very honest. He interviewed people in Maine and Hastings down here in BC about the growing tent cities and stuff. He literally outed corruption of the skimming that is going on, the amount people are getting paid to run these things. It's unbelievable. And somehow our governments are making money from this big pharma takeover of safe supply injection sites, where it's just a big conflict of interest. It's just gross what's going on.
Well, that's basically, when I was down in Washington, and just for your viewers as well, I was at the Senate, but the main purpose for me going down there was to be at the International Crisis Summit. Now, it used to be called the International COVID Summit, and they've held, this was the fifth one. We've held in various capitals and parliaments around Europe and now the United States, and we're hoping to bring the ICS to Canada next year as well. But this is the endless con I describe it. Like all of these things are con jobs. We're led to believe the true motives, the true objectives are suitably and skillfully obscured and camouflaged from our view, unless you're very inquisitive, but they're all con jobs. And COVID was just the biggest, boldest lie and the biggest, boldest con up until 2020. But there's bigger, bolder cons underway. The WHO pandemic treaty, the Chinese social credit, the digital passports, the AI, bio-digital convergence, CBDCs, 15-minute cities, global warming, but also the homelessness, these homeless cities, and much smaller cons. They're still very hurtful, they're very detrimental, and the critical race theory con and the transgender con. These are all perpetrated so that public money can be extracted for consultants, bureaucrats, evildoers to make a handsome living and make significant profits at the public's expense. And the ultimate, all of these things are elements of control of the population. And, as I said in Washington, as a young child, I used to go to bed having terrible, terrible nightmares and being terrified of the looming ice age that we were hearing about when I was a young child in the 60s, only to wake up as an adult to global warming. From the looming ice age to global warming and everything in between, whether it was Y2K, the hole in the ozone layer, the acid rain, the killer bees, whatever you want to say it. These were, it's a con job when the solution is taking more money from the public, or the solution is more money from the public, and the resulting consequence is less freedom for the individual and more control by the government.
And there's not going to be a weather change because of that. Give me a break.
Yeah.
So
I can tell you, I haven't spent any carbon tax. I heat my home and my cabin here with wood that I cut on my property. And it's still been a warmer winter than usual, even without me paying the carbon tax. So
speaking of your cabin, you have spent, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, it doesn't matter, on the lawyers that you just let go of because you wanted to keep going without having to pay. You're doing something in Ontario where you're renting out your cabin to help pay for the legal costs that have been eating up you and your family. How does somebody rent out your cabin in Ontario?
Well, you can go to nomorlockdowns.ca, and you can book the cabin on there. And there's also a function to donate as well. And I have to thank everybody. People have been generous, and that has been able to keep my head afloat and keep me speaking out. During COVID, what I did, this was the original log homestead on my property. It's over 200 years old. Over the centuries, it had fallen into a state of disrepair, and I decided to do something productive in between rallies and speaking out against the con. And we fixed it up and put a kitchen in it, raised it up, put heating in a washroom and water and internet. And you can take a look at nomorlockdowns.ca. We call it Scuttlebutt Lodge. And come on down if you want to get away and have a little bit of freedom and enjoy a bonfire pit and some beverages and like-minded people.
I wish I lived in Ontario. I'd for sure rent it. We love getting away.
Yeah.
Norb and I need it badly. Okay, I don't know if you have the energy still to go on, but the Winnipeg lab. I read an article by Sam Cooper that I was actually going to read out on one of my next episodes where he ties together everything to do with the Winnipeg lab, the players involved, the vials going to the States, and the Winnipeg lab and the Wuhan lab. The plot keeps thickening. From what you've seen of what Sam Cooper wrote and everything you've looked at, does it look like this bioweapon, which is COVID, do you think that we played a part in it?
Oh, without question. So, the evidence has come out much more, and the evidence keeps dribbling out. But if you watch the congressional hearings by Jim Jordan, the investigative committees by Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, the great work by people like Mike Benz and so many others, what you can now know with certainty is, well, let me phrase it this way. Anybody who doesn't want to reveal facts and evidence, there's only one reason why people don't reveal facts and evidence, and that is because of culpability. It's because they did something wrong, they did something evil, they did something criminal, and they don't want other people to know what happened. So at the Winnipeg lab, we know that even though great efforts were put forth to have a parliamentary committee examine what happened there, the Speaker, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and Trudeau would not reveal for a number of years what actually happened. We now know as well that the censorship and the suppression on both the mainstream media and social media was orchestrated by the Department of Homeland Security, the CIA, FBI, CSIS, DND here. We know those are absolute facts that are now known. Our intelligence institutions were the ones who were orchestrating this censorship and putting people like you and I in the yoke in the town square for people to beat on, right? And why? Why would our law enforcement and intelligence services be interested in suppressing facts and dissenting views? Well, it's because they were involved in both the gain of function research on COVID-19, and they were also significantly involved in the creation of the mRNA jabs. And, and of course, it would be foolhardy to consider these things vaccines now. That again has been widely revealed that it never prevented transmission, never prevented infection, and did nothing to alleviate degree of sickness or whatever. Quite the alternative is what is now known with those mRNA jabs. But we also know that the U.S. Department of Defense, through DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and the DoD Threat Reduction Agency were all involved in the funding of the gain of function research, along with the CDC and the NIH. And the gain of function research is something that was, by U.S. statute and U.S. law, was unlawful to do. They had to do it elsewhere. So they did some of it in Winnipeg. They did some of it in Wuhan. I'm sure some of the 46 biolabs in the Ukraine may also have been involved, and that was a rush to clean those things out before the Russians moved into the Donbass. All those places are only snippets of the 300 U.S. Department of Defense funded biosecurity labs scattered throughout the world. And just for, if anybody is interested in this, in Canada, we have one biosecurity level 4 lab, and that's in Winnipeg. One. In the Ukraine, a country that has one of the lowest standards of living in Europe before 2022, before the special military operation by the Russians, the poorest standard of living, lowest economic activity, they had 46 of these biosecurity labs in one of the poorest countries in the world, where one of the richest countries, Canada, has one. how does this make sense? And why were they all funded by the Department of Defense in the U.S.? So put the put the pieces of the puzzle together, boys and girls in Canada. Put the pieces of the puzzle, boys and girls in the United States. Your military, your institutions are funding gain of function research in your military's funded labs throughout the world, and your intelligence services and your law enforcement are suppressing anyone from discussing this and removing them from social media. Let's put two and two together. It doesn't add up that China was the culprit here. I think they were manipulated as well. And I think they were a bit of a patsy on this COVID con. But there you have it. Those are the irrefutable facts now. And as much as I think many bureaucrats are incompetent, this was not a game of incompetence that was played on the people in the Western world. This was a purposely done by the U.S. state.
And the globalist players at the top is what I'll say,
Well,
which includes the City of London. There's a City of London players too.
yeah, so this is, when I describe Canada as a fascist country, because of the integration, the seamless integration between the corporate world and the political and the public world, that's not unique to Canada. That is certainly in play in the United States as well, certainly in play in every Western country to some degree or other. Like some may be a little bit less, some may be a little bit worse, but it is the Western world has become a fascist entity. And
the greats have been warning us about this, especially America, for so long. So speaking of the whole Wuhan thing, Michael Cooper, an MP for the Conservative Party, everyone's sending me this now. And I'm like, okay, another petition, turn over the documents. Tell Trudeau to let the RCMP finish their criminal investigation. Oh no, this is about the SNC Lavalin affair. I can't even keep up. Okay, so now we're back to Lavalin. There's a petition that an MP, Conservative MP, too little, too late. I mean, I know they've been calling out a Lavalin for a long time. Yeah, the Conservative Party has, but where were the Conservatives when you were being thrown to the wolves? I mean, here's what I say. If okay, China, let's say, and CBC and CTV and Global have reported on this before. There's a politician that spoke out some truth in China and actually went to protest with a sign with all the people in China peacefully. If that politician was thrown in jail for standing with democracy peacefully with a sign, which should be his right, and he was thrown in jail or going through what you're going through, our news would literally be reporting on what China's doing to this guy. They do this stuff all the time. When it comes to you, except for they probably trashed you a long time ago, silence. Do you think CBC wants to go, do you want to see what they're trying to say is assault to Randy Hillier, who was, an MPP in Ontario? See that gate that opened? That's what they're trying to put him in jail for.
So this is no different than the falsehood and the fabrications of February 2022 in Ottawa. We had the most joyful, the most enjoyable, the most exuberant, the most exhilarating, fun time in any period in Ottawa's history, and I would say in Canada's history. And instead, it was described as an overthrow of democracy, an insurrection. Everything that came out of the mouths of our politicians was an outright knowing, and they knew it, and therefore it was a lie. They were lying to the people of Ontario. But there's something else I want you mentioned the petition, and petitions have a long history and an important history in our legislative process. But let me be very clear. Nobody should sign a petition ever again in this country. The petitions are now only used for data harvesting by the politicians. They're not used to advance or to legitimize a view or an opinion. That it is all duplicitous what has happened with the electronic petition process in the House of Commons and in our legislatures. So if anybody thinks them putting their name on a petition is going to be of any value or benefit to them, you are being conned once again.
Okay, but I
These
have a
are
question about that because I
so,
do
but
promote. I have a question though,
yeah,
so because I'm going to forget, and then you can go on. I promote these petitions that are the ones that actually will be seen in Parliament, not the dumb ones that Bill Gates owns, not those dumb ones. But if we don't sign them, can't the Liberals and everybody else involved go like, "Oh, look, they only got 100 signatures. Nobody cares." Don't we have to make a statement somehow?
yeah, and it's easy to make a statement that works, and a statement that has value and benefit. Uh, Take the 2 minutes instead of going on their website and collecting your data. Pick up the phone and call your elected representative and give them a piece of your mind. Uh, Take a minute and compose your own view and thought and send it to your elected representative. That's elected representatives are, the system is designed well. They are to represent the people in their community.
Mhm.
They cannot do that if you never communicate with your elected representative.
And
How
you
is
know what you're talking about because you were one. You were an MPP and you would get emails or letters, and you're right about that. So we should be writing to our local MP and MLA?
and don't forget the telephone. The telephone works marvelously. And also for anybody that has two legs, walk into the office and show them your face. We have so many tools at our disposal to, you know, what do you think would happen if 100,000 people actually went in to see their MLAs and MPPs? Like, get off Twitter, get off, TikTok or Solitaire or whatever you're doing, and go out and actually see them, or pick up the phone. Uh, we have, God gave us a voice, and we put freedom of speech at the highest, most protected freedom that we have, so that we could use it.
Mhm.
Freedom of speech is not protected so that we can be silent.
Yep.
It's and again, it's just using the system the way it was originally designed, and not using it the way that it has been conflated and distorted to, where parties will collect your email addresses, your phone numbers, your name, your postal codes, put them in their polling maps, do targeted GOTV, do fundraising campaigns based on your desire to have less restrictive gun laws, or your desire to have more money spent for affordable homes, or whatever it is. They're going to
Yep.
target you. You have to get involved. And many people in our country and in the Western world think their duty in a democracy is to go to the ballot box once every 4 years. And it should be intuitive to people. If you have a garden and you go and plant the seeds once every 4 years, you're not going to have much to harvest if that's all you're going to do, if that's the extent of your labors. And democracy, you should look at it sort of like a garden. You need to pull the bloody weeds out of it often. You need to prune it back. You need to take care of it. It's really rewarding at the end of the day when you have a good garden, but it takes some effort. And it's the same thing with democracy. It's the same thing with anything. If I was to leave my tractor out in my yard for 4 years and think I'm going to go out and start it one day 4 years later, well, guess what? It's not going to do the job that I wanted it to do if I didn't take care of it. And
Mhm.
that's really, it's not whether you're going to vote for the blue team or the red team because both those teams are the same. There's very little difference between them. But what does make a difference? The only thing that makes a difference is if you actually get involved all the time. That's
Yep.
making those phone calls, making those emails, going out to visit, and
Running, running
and
for
running. You know, the
school
best
board,
thing that
town
you
council. Yeah.
run for the hospital board or the library board and stop the LGBT drag queen shows at your local library, or be on the hospital board and tell them, well, that's a stupid policy to still have masks on or not allow unvaccinated nurses to be in here, and or on town council or on school boards or run as an independent as in the provincial legislature. And this is not about winning, it's about speaking, it's about telling people what you believe. I think, put a sign up in your yard saying no more lockdowns, or put a sign up in your yard saying, we believe in family here. Like, anything and everything you can do, but be engaged. Don't think you're going to turn your back and just go to the ballot box once every 4 years and think that everything is just going to be fine. I think that should be obvious to people. We need to do something a little bit differently than what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Yep, because they have designed this top down and we need to take it back bottom up. And Rosa Quare, before she passed away, said, if you guys don't start getting involved and getting into your local towns level council, you're going to be hooped. And we've let it
We,
slip.
yeah, yeah. Like, and you look back at our history, look back at our ancestors, how they built this country. It wasn't by sitting back and playing on TikTok or something. They were involved. Like, I look back at the history here in Lanark County, and the first library created in Upper Canada was here. And these people who immigrated here and who had to clear a plot of land and build a log home, and without chainsaws and backhoes and skill saws, and still had time to go out and create a library and collect books for their community. Now, how the hell did they have time to do that? Struggling to keep their family warm and fed in a new land in the bush. And we think that, well, that's too much effort for us. In life, you get out of it what you put into it. And
True.
if you're lucky, but and if you're fortunate, but if you put nothing into it, guess what? Somebody else is, and that's and they want control over you. They want you to believe that you can't do anything on your own. Just give it to the other guys in the blue and the red teams, and they'll take care of you and generate more homelessness, generate more drug addicts, generate more fear, generate more screwed up kids who think boys can be girls and girls can be boys. And don't worry, just give us some more money and it won't get too hot for you and the ocean won't dry up. I'm not,
Well,
and I will say, let me say one last thing.
yeah.
COVID has been a blessing in disguise. We should look at COVID with a great silver lining. It has woken a great many Canadians up to the BS and the con job that we've been subjected to. And now there's a great many more people aware just how fraudulent the fraud that we've been sold as being good for us.
Yes. Amen. And thank you for standing up for Canadians from the very beginning. Thank you for everything you've done. You're taking all the eggs and you're having to dole out this money for lawyers, but now you're representing yourself. You have done so much for Canada, and the freedom community absolutely loved you. And so, where can we follow you, Randy? Tell us all the places.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter, but that's heavily censored. They don't, all my content is deemed sensitive, but you can follow me there. If Elon will let you find my handle, it's at Randy Hillier. I'm on Facebook, but that is heavily filtered and suppressed as well. And it's Randy.Hillier. I don't use any pseudonyms or aliases. I'm also on Instagram, Randy Hillier, but my No More Lockdowns page, and also I've started Substack this week. It's a free
You're
Substack.
writing. That would be good to follow you at, because then we keep up with everything you're doing and saying. So, what is your Substack address?
It's No More Lockdowns Canada /Randy Hillier.
Not dub.substack.com.
Oh yeah, whatever that. But it's No
Okay.
More Lockdowns Canada /Randy Hillier. Or
Okay.
you can also go on the nomorolockdowns.ca website and subscribe to the email there as well.
Okay, good idea. Well, thank you, Randy, and I'll be following you because I want to see what the heck is going to happen to you. And I think I just can't imagine that they would put you in jail, because they would look like such complete knobs at this point. They're already embarrassed with the Coots 4, the Coots 2 that are left. To do this to you, do you think you're going to end up in jail?
Well, I know that I'm not gonna go without a fight. I know that the evidence again that they have against me is not only fictitious, it's also fabricated. I have a Stinchcomb application going in the next couple of weeks to get evidence unredacted. I have an O'Connor application I'm putting in a couple of weeks to get more third-party evidence revealed. I can tell you that I know the evidence has been fabricated that they're using against me, and I'm going to make sure that their skullduggery, their dishonesty is put under the bright lights of democracy, and these stinking rats will see what happens to them when the light
And
is
it's
shown.
our duty to share what's happening to Randy so they know we know. We want to embarrass what's left of our joke of a justice system, that they can't get away with this.
Yeah, and also, one other thing like what you're doing, Odessa, and what so many people are doing with the independent media, we need to do everything possible to and continue to encourage people to find their news elsewhere,
Mhm.
and just turn off the mainstream media. Turn off, I have unfollowed every journalist that I used to follow. I have unfollowed every mainstream media, Twitter, Facebook, social media account. Uh, I used to read, 4 or 5 newspapers a day. I don't subscribe to any newspapers. I have, like these guys are profiting from the fear that they sell you. They profiting from the fear that you accept or believe. They're profiting from the control that they have over you. As soon as it's not profitable for them to control you, as soon as it's not profitable for them to keep you in a state of fear, that's when they'll change.
Yep. Yep. 100%. Well, thank you so much, Randy. You're welcome here any day. And I hope to meet you in person one day in Ontario. That would be amazing.
Well, whether or one day I might make it out to BC. Who knows?
Okay. Well, you can
So
stay here.
right on. Okay, it's been a
Okay.
pleasure.
Thank you, Randy.
Bye bye.
What is the body's most important nutrient? By volume, the average body is 62% hydrogen, 24% oxygen, 12% carbon, and only 2% everything else. Health science is concentrated on minerals and vitamins, but those are part of only the 2%. When considering proteins and carbs, they miss the importance of hydrogen, how we normally get it, and its role in the body. Hydrogen is the building block of life, and it's involved in virtually every chemical process in the body. Without sufficient hydrogen, the body starts shutting down systems that aren't immediately life-threatening to preserve hydrogen and life. First, the regeneration system shut down, you age quicker and heal slowly. Then, the immune system shut down, you get sick easier. And finally, organs start to fail. Science is proving that chronic lack of hydrogen causes or exacerbates nearly every ailment known to man. How do we normally get our hydrogen? What is the best way to get hydrogen into your body? What is Brown's gas? Learn more at aquacure.life. That's aquacure.life. And if you do decide to buy the AquaCure AC50, put Liberty spelled normally in the discount code box for 5% off the retail price, and it's a 1-year money-back guarantee. Norb and I absolutely love ours.